I will never forget the sound her hand made when it struck me again and again, not a single sharp crack, but a flurry of stinging blows, each one landing with the hot finality of humiliation. It was my son's wife, my new daughter-in-law, the woman he had chosen, the woman who thought I was nothing. And she beat me in front of everyone at her lavish 32nd birthday party, not knowing I was his mother. For one impossible moment, the entire room froze. Her friend stopped mid-laugh. The DJ's music sputtered into silence. Even the glittering chandeliers that hung above us seemed to stand still, holding their breath as her final strike pushed me backward. My palm hit the marble floor first, then my hip, then the thick, cold tile swallowed the rest of my dignity. I felt the burning outline of her fingers blooming across my cheek and forehead, a map of her fury etched right onto my skin. My ears rang. I could taste metal. I must have looked stunned, like some foolish old woman who had stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. But I wasn't a stranger. I was her mother-in-law. She simply didn't know it. Her voice sliced through the air like ice. "Who let this woman in here?" she screamed, pointing down at me. "Liam. Liam. Get her out. She's one of the servers, look at her. She's ruined everything." Her perfectly manicured finger trembled with outrage as she gestured at the expensive dessert table behind me, where a single overturned champagne flute lay on its side, its gold rim reflecting the party lights like an accusation. I had simply tried to steady a platter for the young waiter who nearly dropped it. But my heel caught a decorative rug, my balance faltered, and in an instant the entire table shifted. It was an accident, an ordinary, human accident, but to her, I had committed a sin worthy of punishment. Guests whispered, shrinking back as if my poverty might stain their designer shoes. I could feel their eyes crawling over me, my modest dress, my sensible shoes, my hands still rough with years of labor. I wasn't polished like them. I didn't shine the way they did under the lights. And tonight, they wanted me invisible. But then, I heard it. My son's voice. It cut through the room with a coldness I had not heard since he was a boy protecting me from a loan shark on our porch back home. "Victoria," he said quietly. The room went dead silent. My son, my brilliant, wealthy, world-famous son, stood near the stage, staring at his wife with an expression I had seen only once in my life. He wasn't angry. Anger is loud. This was something far more dangerous. "What?" he asked, each word deliberate, "did you just do?" Victoria whipped toward him, her fury melting into mock distress. "Baby, I was defending our party. This woman, this server, she ruined everything. Look at the mess she made. I don't know who she is or why she's here." Liam did not blink. "She is my mother." Gasps rippled across the room like a wave. Someone dropped a glass. Someone else swore under their breath. Victoria's face drained of all color. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. My son's jaw tightened. "Party's over," he said. "Everyone, please leave. No shouting. No theatrics. Just an icy command that made every guest scramble for their coats." He didn't look at her again. He didn't need to. In that moment, her bright, glittering birthday collapsed around her like a dying star. And I knew. My son was about to end far more than a party. After the last guest hurried out of the hall, heels clicking, voices whispering, someone muttering, I had no idea, the huge room felt as empty as an abandoned church. Balloons still floated near the ceiling, gold ribbons swayed from the vents, and on the floor where I had fallen, droplets of spilled champagne glimmered like broken stars. I stood there trembling, still feeling the sting of my daughter-in-law's blows on my face. My son, Liam, didn't ask me if I was all right. He didn't have to. He simply draped his expensive suit jacket over my shoulders, the fabric warm from his body, and guided me gently away from the shattered remains of the dessert table. I could feel the fury rolling off him, cold, quiet, controlled. The kind of fury that doesn't shout. The kind that destroys silently. Victoria stood frozen a few steps away, her perfect birthday makeup streaked with the beginnings of panic. Liam, baby. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was. He held up one hand, and she stopped talking. Instantly. Don't lie, he said softly. You didn't care who she was. That's the problem. His voice hit harder than any of her blows. I watched confusion flash across her face. Victoria wasn't used to consequences. She was used to blame rolling off her shoulders the way water rolls off marble. But now the room was empty. No friends to whisper support. No cameras to smile for. No audience to clap on cue. Just me. Her. And the son she had just humiliated. Liam, she tried again, her voice wobbling. This is your mother? Dressed like that? Why didn't anyone tell me? He didn't even look at her. She came here because she loves me, he said. And you beat her. You put your hands on my mother. The way he said mother, low, cold, final, made the air feel heavy. Then his eyes cut to me, softening, apologizing, aching. He lifted my hand as if examining a wound. Come on, Mom, he murmured. Let's get you somewhere safe. It had been years since he called me Mom like that. The last time was when he was 16, standing protectively in front of me as a loan shark banged on our porch demanding money we didn't have. But tonight, he sounded even more dangerous. Victoria stepped forward, reaching out as if she could pull back time with her manicured fingernails. Liam, please. We can explain this. She tripped. She ruined the table. I reacted because guests were watching. I was embarrassed. I didn't know. He looked at her with an expression that emptied her words of meaning. You were embarrassed? He asked. My mother fell. She could have gotten hurt. And you were embarrassed? She blinked rapidly, searching for the right combination of lies and charm, but for the first time, nothing worked. Liam's stare sliced through everything false. Pack your things, he said quietly. Her breath hitched. What? You heard me. This marriage, he paused, letting the silence sharpen the moment. Is over. She stumbled backward as if he'd physically struck her. Liam. This is my birthday. You're ending everything because of her? No, he said calmly. I'm ending it because of you. He turned back to me, looping his arm under mine as if I were made of glass. Let's go, Mom. He didn't glance back once as he led me out of the glittering hall, past the velvet ropes, past the stunned staff frozen in place, past the golden entryway that had welcomed only wealth and pride. Outside, the night air hit my skin like a blessing. The party behind us was quiet. But I knew the storm ahead of Victoria was just beginning. My son didn't end the night. He ended the marriage. And deep down, I feared this was only the beginning of the consequences she never saw coming. When Liam helped me into the car that night, his jacket still draped around my shoulders, the city lights outside blurred into a soft haze. Maybe it was the shock, maybe it was the ache spreading through my cheek and ribs, but for a moment I felt myself drifting back, not to New York, not to that glittering birthday hall, but to another life entirely. A life built on grit, coal dust, and love so stubborn it could survive anything except time. My name is Margaret Holloway, though folks back home just called me Maggie. I'm 68 years old, and before anyone knew my son's name, before he owned companies and penthouses, I was simply the wife of a coal miner. My husband, Robert, was a man shaped by the mountains of Burnell County. Broad shoulders, soot-stained laugh, and eyes as steady as the earth he worked in. When he held my hand for the first time, I remember thinking his palm felt like warm stone, rough, scarred, but somehow comforting. He used to joke that the mountain owned half of him. And in the end, I suppose it did. But in the beginning, those were good years. Our house was small, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, a kitchen that always smelled faintly of fried onions and winter drafts, but it was ours. We'd sit on the porch after supper, listening to crickets sing while the miners changed shifts. Some nights, I'd lean my head on his shoulder and feel the thrum of exhaustion in him, but he'd still smile and say, "Long as I make it back to you and Liam, Maggie, I'm the richest man alive." But rich men don't cough blood. I still remember the first time he choked mid-sentence, grabbing the edge of the table, his whole body tightening like someone had tied a rope around his lungs. He brushed it off. "They all did. Just dust," he said. "Comes with the job. But dust doesn't steal a man breath by breath. Dust doesn't turn a strong back into a shaking frame." The doctors in town called it pneumoconiosis. Black lung. That's what they named it. I called it murder by inches. Every night, I'd hear him cough until tears streamed down his face, his chest rattling like loose tools in a truck bed. I'd rub his back, whispering prayers into the darkness, begging God to give him one more good breath. Just one. But sickness is a thief that doesn't bargain. Liam was only 14 when Robert died. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom the night his father took his last breath, his hands pressed together like he was holding something fragile between them. I saw him flinch when the coughing suddenly stopped. Silence has a sound when it's that final. I pulled him close, and he buried his face in my shoulder, my strong, bright boy who suddenly felt so small. After the funeral, the bills came. Medical expenses stacked like bricks, funeral costs piled like another grave being dug. It felt like the mountain wasn't finished taking from us. Some days I woke up with a weight on my chest so heavy I thought I'd suffocate before sunrise. But I had Liam. And a promise I made to Robert when he could still hear me. "You won't take my boy," I whispered to that mountain the day after we buried him. "You took my husband. You're not taking my child." So I worked. At first, it was just the diner on Main Street, the one with peeling red booths and a bell above the door that rang even when no one touched it. I served coffee that tasted like burnt pennies and smiled at tired men who always left the smallest tips they could manage. My feet swelled. My back screamed. My hands cracked from scrubbing tables until the wood shone. Then came the cleaning jobs. Then the late-night shifts. Then the feeling that sleep was something other women did. But every time exhaustion brought me to my knees, I'd picture Liam's face bent over another library book held together with tape and hope. And I'd stand back up. Those years after Robert passed felt like living inside a long, dim hallway where the lights flickered but never fully went out. Every morning, I woke before dawn, sat on the edge of my bed for a moment, and reminded myself what I had promised: the mountain will not take my son. That promise became the fuel in my veins, stronger than coffee, stronger than grief, stronger than the cold ache of widowhood. My days started at the diner before the sun touched the tops of the trees. I'd unlock the door, tie on my faded apron, and start brewing the same rusty coffee miners had been drinking since before I was born. The place smelled permanently of grease and tiredness. Some mornings I could barely feel my feet, but I kept smiling, kept pouring, kept moving. The customers were mostly older miners with worn-out knuckles and faces carved by years in the dark. They reminded me of Robert, and that alone gave me the strength to refill their cups without complaint. But the diner wasn't enough. Grief is heavy, but debt is heavier. So after my shift, I'd drive to the next town over, Creston Hills, where people had vacation homes they barely lived in, and I cleaned them to keep the lights on. Those houses were nothing like mine. Marble countertops, chandeliers, floors so shiny I could see the exhaustion dripping down my face when I mopped them. Sometimes I'd pause and stare at my reflection, hair tied back, cheeks sunken, fingers cracked from bleach, and I'd wonder if those wealthy owners even knew someone scrubbed their toilets while silently begging the universe for a few more dollars. My hands became the map of my survival. Cracked. Stiff. Bleeding. Soaked in hot water and chemicals until the skin peeled like paper. I always kept them hidden when Liam was around. He never needed to know the full price I was paying. He was already carrying the weight of losing his father. I refused to let him carry me too. When I got home after those 2 jobs, there was still more to do. Laundry, cooking, mending his shirts, patching the knees in his pants because he grew faster than I could afford clothes. I'd stand at the stove stirring a pot of soup with one hand while rubbing my aching wrists with the other. There were nights I fell asleep sitting up, my head tipping forward until my chin hit my chest. But what kept me going was Liam. Always Liam. He studied like the world depended on it. His teachers said he had a mind sharper than a knife and more determination than boys twice his age. I'd find him asleep at the kitchen table, his cheek pressed against a textbook, the lamp flickering above him. Sometimes he'd wake up when I tried to cover him with a blanket. "Mom," he'd whisper, blinking at me through exhaustion, "I'm gonna make things better for us. I promise." And I'd smile even if my eyes were burning with tears, and say, "Baby, just be a good man. That's all I need." I don't think he ever realized how much those words kept me alive. But the hardest part wasn't the work. It was the constant pressure of bills, electricity, groceries, medical debts, school fees. They piled up like snow on a roof, threatening to collapse everything I was holding together with my bare hands. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one night, the stack of unpaid notices in front of me, the lamp buzzing like a dying firefly. I stared at those papers and felt swallowed by failure. But then I heard Liam's soft breathing in the next room. And I straightened up. Because a mother doesn't collapse. Not when a child is counting on her. Those years were brutal. But they shaped everything that would come next. They shaped Liam. They shaped me. And they shaped the storm that would later blow apart our lives in New York, the storm that began with a beating at a birthday party. The hardest days weren't always the ones where I worked 3 shifts back to back. Sometimes the worst days were when I had to face people who thought they were better than me. People who saw the dirt under my fingernails and assumed they knew everything about my life. I learned that poverty doesn't just empty your pockets, it strips away your dignity piece by piece, unless you fight for it. One of the darkest days came on a crisp October afternoon, where the wind smelled like burning leaves and the sky looked far too gentle for the humiliation waiting for me. I remember sitting in my old Ford, the engine coughing like it shared my exhaustion, staring at the brick building of Burnell County High School. I wore my best dress that day, the navy blue one I'd saved for Robert's funeral. It was the nicest thing I owned, the only piece of clothing that made me feel like I still had some color left in my life. But even wearing that dress, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. I was there because Liam had been accepted into an advanced course, an opportunity that could shift the entire arc of his future. But there were fees. And fees meant pressure. And pressure meant I had to swallow what little pride I had left and ask for more time. I rehearsed my words in the parking lot, smoothing my dress, trying to hide the raw patches on my hands. "I'll pay in installments. I just need a little more time, he deserves this chance," over and over, like a prayer. I finally forced my feet to move, walked into the school's main office, and was told to wait outside Principal Howard's door. Howard Brennan, thin hair, colder heart. A man who carried himself as if being in charge of a decaying high school made him royalty. When he finally opened the door and ushered me inside, the air in his office smelled of polished wood and cheap cologne. I sat down, knees together, hands gripping my purse so tightly the strap creaked. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, adjusting his glasses in that way people do when they want to look down on you from a higher place. "You're here about the AP program fees?" "Yes, sir." My voice wavered despite my best efforts. I'm asking for a little more time. I work 2 jobs, and I can pay everything. I just need a few more weeks." He sighed loudly, an exaggerated, theatrical sigh meant to make me feel like a burden. "Rules are rules," he said. "We can't make special accommodations." "It's not a special accommodation," I whispered. "It's just a payment plan. I'll sign anything." He leaned back, folding his arms with a patronizing smirk. "You people always say that. You people." I felt the word strike deeper than any insult Victoria ever threw at me years later. You people, meaning poor. Meaning less than. Meaning invisible. But I swallowed it. Because this wasn't about me. This was about Liam. I promise, I said quietly. I'll pay. Please, sir. He made me sign a formal agreement, sliding the paper toward me like he was doing charity for a stray. My hand trembled as I held the pen. I could feel my cheeks burning, but I signed anyway. When I left his office, I held my head straight, shoulders squared, hands buried in my pockets to hide their roughness. I had survived the humiliation. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that Liam had come to bring me my coat. I'd forgotten it in the morning rush. He stood just outside the office door. He heard everything. Every condescending sigh. Every cold word. Every crack in my voice. He never said a thing to me. Not then. Not for years. But later, much later, he told me that moment lit something inside him. Something fierce. Something unstoppable. He wasn't just going to escape our broken town. He was going to make sure no one ever looked at me like that again. I didn't know Liam had heard the principal speaking to me until many years later, but something in him shifted from that day onward. At the time, I just noticed little changes, small flickers of determination that hadn't been there before. But I didn't understand their meaning until much later, when I realized they were the early sparks of the fire that would one day build his empire. In the weeks after that meeting, Liam grew quieter. Not sad, no, sadness was something I knew how to recognize in him. This was different. This was focus. Like a runner lowering their head right before the starting gun. He did his chores the same, spoke the same, smiled at me the same, but when he sat at the kitchen table with his books, the air around him felt charged. I'd walk into the kitchen late at night, thinking he had gone to bed, only to find him hunched over another worn-out library book, taking notes under the yellow glow of our one good lamp. Sometimes I'd tell him softly, "Baby, it's late. You need sleep." And he'd look up at me with those sharp eyes he inherited from Robert and say, "Just a little more, Mom." He meant it every time. I didn't realize he was studying to outrun something, to outrun the shame he'd felt watching me beg for more time, to outrun that hollow look in Principal Brennan's eyes. But he never said it out loud. Not once. Instead, he let the work speak for him. Straight A's. Extra credit. Competitions. Anything that had a prize, a scholarship, a door he could pry open with effort alone. Meanwhile, I continued working myself into the ground. 3 jobs, some days. I'd come home with my legs shaking so badly I'd have to sit in the car for a few minutes before I could climb our porch steps. But every time I opened that door, tired as I was, the sight of Liam studying at the table would revive me. Sometimes I'd watch him without speaking, just standing in the doorway, hands still smelling of bleach and diner grease, staring at this boy who refused to give up. He had Robert's quiet stubbornness and my hunger for survival. A dangerous combination, but the kind that builds legends. The first miracle came when he was 17. A letter arrived with a bright blue seal on the envelope. I had just come home from cleaning a mansion that smelled like lavender and rich loneliness. My back felt like it was made of broken bricks, and my hands were trembling from the cold. Liam was already home, sitting at the table with a half-eaten sandwich. "Mom," he said, holding the envelope between his fingers, "this is for me." When I saw the crest, my heart stuttered. I couldn't afford hope was expensive, but something in his expression made my breath catch. He opened it slowly. He read it twice. Then he handed it to me. A scholarship. A full one. I stared at those words until they blurred. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or fall to my knees. Instead, Liam stood up, wrapped his arms around me, and held me so tightly I could feel his heartbeat against my chest. It was the same rhythm I felt when he was a baby, sleeping in my arms after long nights of colic and cold floors. "You won't have to worry anymore," he whispered. "I promise." The truth was, I didn't believe him. Not then. Fear makes mothers cautious. And poverty makes disbelief a habit. But I nodded, because he needed to see faith in my eyes, even if I had to borrow every drop of it. What I didn't know was that the scholarship was only the beginning. My son was about to climb higher than anything our broken town could contain. And I was about to witness the making of a man who would one day bring half the world to a standstill after what his bride did to me on her birthday. Liam left for college with nothing but a battered suitcase, a scholarship letter, and a determination so sharp it could cut through steel. Watching that bus pull away from Burnell County felt like watching the sun rise after years of living underground. I stood there waving until the dust settled, whispering, "Go, baby. Go build the life your father never got to see." Those 4 years were a blur of phone calls, late-night texts, and long stretches where I didn't hear from him because he was too busy working, studying, interning, taking odd jobs, doing anything that kept him moving upward. Every time he called, he sounded more confident, more sure of himself. But he never forgot me. Not once. During his junior year, he got an internship at a technology firm in New York City. He told me the city felt like a living creature, loud, wild, impossible, but he loved it. He thrived in the chaos the way some people thrive in sunlight. By the time he graduated, they had already offered him a full-time position. "Mom," he told me over the phone, breathless with excitement, "I think I'm going to make it here." I closed my eyes and felt tears gather. The mountain had not taken my son. He had risen above it. He worked his way up faster than anyone expected. His bosses noticed his discipline. His coworkers noticed his hunger. By 26, he was leading teams. By 28, he owned a piece of the company. By 30, everyone knew his name. And so did I, though I still saw him as the boy who read library books under that old lamp. The first time he flew me to New York, I was 59. I had never been on a plane before. I gripped the armrests so tightly during takeoff that my fingers cramped, but when we landed, and I stepped into that wide, gleaming airport, I felt like I had stepped into a new world made entirely of glass and noise. Liam's car, a sleek black thing that purred rather than rattled, waited for us. He held my elbow as I climbed inside. "Mom, you're safe," he said softly. "Just breathe." His penthouse was larger than any house I'd ever been inside. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over Central Park like a painting come to life. Marble floors, soft rugs, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. There were staff. Real staff, people who cooked, cleaned, pressed clothes. I didn't know what to do with myself. The first morning there, I woke at 5 a.m. out of habit. I padded into the kitchen to make breakfast before remembering, someone else was paid to do that. I felt useless. Like a guest in my own child's life. The silence in that sparkling apartment swallowed me whole. One afternoon, I found myself on my knees scrubbing the guest bathroom tiles out of instinct. When Liam walked by and saw me, he froze. "Mom, don't do that," he whispered. "I just needed to keep my hands busy," I told him. But the truth was deeper. I needed to feel worthy of standing in his world. I needed to feel like I belonged somewhere in the glossy life he had built. He didn't push me. He understood more than he said. And then everything changed when he brought home the woman who would one day beat me at her birthday party. A woman so polished she sparkled. A woman born into money, into status, into a world that looked nothing like mine. Her name was Victoria. Beautiful. Elegant. Expensive. And behind her perfect smile was a coldness I felt the first moment she spoke to me. I didn't know it then, but the day she stepped into our lives was the day a storm began forming, one that would end with her raising her hand against me in front of an entire room. But back then? I was just grateful Liam had someone. Even if something in my bones whispered, "Be careful." From the very first moment I met Victoria, something in me tightened, a quiet warning, like the rustle of leaves before a storm. She was beautiful in that effortless, expensive way people from old money often are. Tall, thin as a magazine page, with hair that looked like it had never seen humidity a day in its life. She smiled at me, but her eyes stayed cold. The kind of cold that doesn't shout, it whispers, like frost creeping across a window pane. "Oh, Mrs. Holloway," she said sweetly that first evening, "I've heard so much about you. Your story is inspiring." She said inspiring the way some people say pitiful. I told myself it was nerves. That I was reading too much into her tone. But the longer she stayed in Liam's life, the more I noticed the little cuts. The tiny, polished insults hidden inside kindness. She'd tilt her head at my dress and say, "Oh, how quaint. You prefer simple things, don't you?" She'd watch me fold napkins and softly mutter, "We should get you a stylist, just to help you blend in better." She'd suggest shopping trips where the price of a scarf could have paid 3 months of rent back home. When Liam wasn't near, those suggestions became sharper. "We really have to work on your posture. You know the cameras pick up everything. Maybe avoid talking too much at dinner. The other wives, they might not understand your background. You remind me of the women who used to clean for my parents. Very hardworking. Hardworking." I'd heard that tone my whole life. Hardworking meant beneath me. But I stayed quiet, because my son loved her. The evening everything snapped into clarity was a small dinner party, just a handful of Victoria's friends, all dripping in diamonds and entitlement. The dining table was so long it felt like a hallway with plates. Candles flickered against the glass, and the whole room smelled faintly of jasmine and money. I sat near the end, trying to use the right fork, trying not to take up space. The silverware was heavier than anything I had ever used, real silver, polished so brightly I could see my reflection bending in the spoon. I picked up the wrong fork. Not intentionally, not dramatically, just a simple mistake. The salad fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the fine china plate with a sound so loud it felt like the whole room inhaled. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. Not at first. Just polite, controlled amusement. But then Victoria leaned forward, covering her mouth with 4 perfectly manicured fingers. "Oh, Connie darling," she said in a voice just loud enough for everyone to hear, "we're using the Tiffany set tonight, not the tin forks from the diner." Her friends tittered. Liam smiled, thinking she was joking. But I heard her. I felt the sting of it deep in my chest. I set the fork down gently and said nothing. But inside, something cracked, not anger, not pride, but a hollow ache. The ache of realizing that your son's partner sees you as a decoration, not a person. After dinner, Victoria floated around the room, laughing like a movie star, while I helped collect the plates out of habit. The housekeeper rushed over, startled. "Oh no, Mrs. Holloway, you don't have to do that." But old habits die quietly. And dignity, once bruised, seeks refuge in work. Liam didn't notice. Why would he? His world was shiny. He didn't see the shadows yet. Driving home that night, he asked, "Mom, did you have fun?" I looked out the window at the passing city lights. "Of course, baby," I whispered. "I always have fun when you're happy." But my hands, those hands that had scrubbed floors and raised him alone, rested in my lap, shaking. Because while he had risen to the top of the world, I had never felt smaller. And deep inside, I knew something was coming. A storm. A reckoning. A birthday party that would end everything. The night of Victoria's birthday beating felt like a crack in time, one of those moments when the world shifts so suddenly, you don't realize you've stepped into a different life until days later. When Liam took my arm and led me out of that glittering ballroom, I thought the worst was over. I thought humiliation was the final wound. But the real storm hadn't even started. Outside, the cold night air wrapped around me like mercy. Liam helped me into the back seat of his car, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. He didn't speak. Not while the driver pulled away from the venue, not while the city lights streaked past the windows like tears. Only when we reached his penthouse did he finally break the silence. "Mom," he whispered, his voice shaking with a fury I had never heard from him, "I'm so sorry." I touched his hand gently. "Baby, I'm all right." But I wasn't. My cheek throbbed. My ribs ached. And deep in my chest was a bruise that had nothing to do with fists. By morning, everything had changed. Someone at the party had recorded the entire scene, Victoria beating me, her shrill accusations, Liam announcing I was his mother, and ending the marriage all in one cold breath. The video spread like wildfire. By sunrise, my face, confused, hurt, shaking, was everywhere. People were angry. People were crying. People were furious at Victoria. They called it the birthday beating. I didn't even know what trending meant, but Liam's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News outlets. Reporters. Bloggers digging into my past, into Burnell County, into Robert's death, into my years at the diner. Overnight, they turned me into some kind of symbol. A mother who sacrificed everything, only to be beaten by the woman her son married. I didn't want any of it. But the world never asks what you want. Within 48 hours, Victoria's life collapsed. Sponsors pulled out. The luxury brands she worked with removed her pictures. Her charity board temporarily suspended her involvement. Even people she once called friends unfollowed her publicly, small betrayals broadcasted as if to prove their innocence. Liam tried to shield me from the chaos, but he couldn't hide the headlines. Heir's wife beats his mother at her own birthday bash. Old money heiress exposed, abuse, lies, and class cruelty. America falls in love with the miner's widow. It was too much. Far too much. On the third day, I walked into the living room to find Liam pacing like a man being chased. "We're leaving," he said. "Today." "Leaving where?" I asked. "Upstate. I have a house there, quiet, private. You need rest. You don't need cameras shoved in your face." "But Liam." "No, Mom." His voice cracked. "I let her hurt you. I won't let the entire world do the same." He packed before I could argue, tossing clothes into bags, grabbing anything he thought I might need. He looked like a man trying to outrun a fire. When we drove away from the city, I kept my gaze fixed on the skyline shrinking behind us. Part of me felt relief. Part of me felt guilt. And another part, one I hadn't expected, felt grief. Grief that my son's once beautiful life had shattered in the span of one night. The house upstate was quiet, surrounded by tall trees that swayed like they were whispering secrets. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. The only sounds were birds and the occasional crackle of leaves. Liam made me tea, covered me in blankets, hovered like a worried child. But it wasn't my bruises he was trying to nurse. It was the wound in his own heart. He had loved her. Truly loved her. And she had beaten his mother because she believed I was beneath her. That truth broke something in him and in me. But I didn't know that the birthday wasn't the end of her cruelty. It was only the beginning of a reckoning none of us saw coming. Life upstate moved at a different rhythm, quiet, steady, gentle. It was the first time in years that I woke up without the sound of traffic or phone notifications echoing through the house. Liam worked remotely, but he stayed close to me, hovering like a hawk. Every morning he made sure I ate, made sure I rested, made sure the world stayed far away. The bruises on my face faded quickly. But the bruises inside him, those took far longer. He tried not to talk about Victoria, but her shadow lingered in every silence. Some nights, I'd hear him pacing the living room long after midnight, whispering to himself like a man replaying a betrayal in endless loops. I wanted to tell him that love doesn't always come wrapped in kindness, that sometimes the people we choose end up being storms in disguise. But he wasn't ready to hear that yet. After a few months, life began to settle. The world, as it often does, found new scandals to chew on. The video faded from the front page of gossip sites. Interest drifted like smoke. And one morning, Liam walked into the kitchen and said, "Mom, I think it's time we go home." So we did. Returning to the city felt surreal. The penthouse was the same, gleaming surfaces, spotless windows, the faint scent of eucalyptus in the air, but something in it felt different. Quieter. More grounded. Liam had changed. Not broken, just reshaped. Harder in some places. softer in others. I still found myself waking early, itching to clean, to cook, to do something with my hands. That old instinct never left me. But instead of scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, I found a place where my hands could do good, a small soup kitchen in Brooklyn run by a kind old pastor. I didn't tell them who I was or who my son was. I didn't want special treatment. I was just Maggie, the woman who chopped vegetables, washed big pots, and ladled stew to anyone who needed warmth. One rainy afternoon, while I stood behind the counter serving bowls of thick stew, a woman broke away from the line and approached me. She moved slowly, hesitantly, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. I looked up, and the ladle nearly fell from my grip. It was Victoria. Her hair was pulled back simply, no makeup, no diamonds, no pretense. The woman who once glowed under chandeliers now stood in front of me looking like a wilted flower. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Mrs. Holloway. I heard you volunteer here. I had to come. I should have felt anger. I expected it to rise in me like fire. But looking at her, all I felt was a deep, quiet ache. She wasn't a villain. She was a woman stripped bare of everything she once used to feel powerful. I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. "I just needed to tell you. I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did. For who I was." Her tears landed on the counter one by one. I didn't offer her comforting lies. I didn't tell her it was all right. Instead, I did the only thing that felt true. I took a clean bowl, filled it with hot stew, added a piece of bread, and placed it gently into her shaking hands. "Forgiveness isn't the hard part," I told her softly. "Living in a way that doesn't require it, that's where life begins." She nodded, trembling, then went to sit alone in the corner, eating quietly, humbly, humanly. That night, back at the penthouse, I stood on the balcony holding the only picture I had saved from Burnell County, me and Robert, faces smudged with coal dust, smiling despite the world. Liam stepped beside me. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" he asked. I lifted my hands, wrinkled, spotted, still marked by a lifetime of work. "These hands built you," I said softly. And that was enough. Liam took them, kissed them gently, and held them like they were priceless. And in that moment, standing high above the glowing city, I felt peace settle into my bones for the first time in decades. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in this person's place? I'd really love to hear your opinion. Big hugs, and see you next time.